Where did the strongest women in our history find their strength? Not in a bottle, not in a powder, not in anything sold on a shelf. One mother, left alone in a barren valley with a thirsty infant and nothing to give him, ran between two hills 7 times in the desert heat. And what Allah brought out of the ground beneath her child has nourished pilgrims for 4,000 years. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, called it food that fills you. It is at number 1. There are 20 Sunnah foods that restore a woman's strength, the foods that carried the mothers, the daughters, and the believing women of Islam. Bismillah, let us begin. 20. Halal goose. We begin with the rich meats the early Muslims relied on for real physical strength, and the first is one most of us have forgotten. Halal goose was among the fuller meats of the Arabs and the peoples of the early conquests. A bird carried on journeys because its richness lasted. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, ate poultry, as recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, and the households of the companions kept the larger birds for the days they needed strength. al-Qayyim, in his Zad al-Ma'ad, placed the meat of the goose among the warming, strengthening foods, heavier than the small birds, and best taken by those who work and move. It must, of course, be halal slaughtered. For the woman rebuilding her strength after a long fast or a hard season, the meats on this list are the old Sunnah answer, real nourishment, taken with gratitude and in balance. 19. Halal camel meat. The meat of the journey and the meat of strength. Camel meat sustained the Arabs across distances nothing else could cross, and it was eaten in the household of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and by his companions. al-Qayyim described camel meat as among the most warming and strengthening of all the meats, dense with the power of the animal that carried the Ummah across the deserts. It must be halal slaughtered. This is a food the modern Muslim diaspora has largely left behind, but it was for centuries the strength meat of a people who walked and rode and carried. For the believing woman, camel meat is a Sunnah link back to the diet that built the strength of the first generations, heavy, honest food, eaten in moderation and with thanks to the one who provided it. 18. Halal tripe and sweetbreads. Now to the whole animal nourishment the Sahaba never wasted. Where the modern table throws away everything but the muscle, the early Muslims used the whole of the halal animal, the tripe, the sweetbreads, the parts richest in what rebuilds the body. al-Qayyim and the physicians of Islam treated these inner cuts as concentrated strength foods, especially for the weak and the recovering. They must be from a halal slaughtered animal, prepared clean. This is not a modern health protocol, and it is no cure. It is simply the way the households of the companions ate. Nothing wasted, every part of Allah's provision honored. For the woman who wants to eat the way the first Muslims ate, the whole animal sunnah is a return to real, dense, unwasted nourishment. 17. Halal kidney. Among those inner cuts, the kidney held a particular place. It was among the concentrated foods the Sahaba-era households used to rebuild strength after illness, fasting, or hard travel. Ibn Sina, in his Canon of Medicine, discussed the organ meats among the strengthening foods when taken in their proper measure. It must be halal slaughtered and prepared clean. The teaching here is moderation. These are not everyday foods to be eaten without limit. They are the strong foods, kept for the days strength is needed. The Sahaba understood balance in a way the modern table has forgotten. Rich foods for hard days, plain foods for ordinary ones, and gratitude over all of it. 16. Halal goat heart, the heart of the animal, for the strength of the household. Goat and lamb heart were among the strengthening meats of the Arabs, dense and nourishing, eaten by families who needed to rebuild. al-Qayyim placed the heart among the warming, fortifying foods. It must be halal slaughtered. There is a quiet wisdom in the old way of eating, that the parts of the animal richest in strength were saved for the ones who most needed to be strong. The nursing mother, the one recovering from illness, the traveler about to set out. The Sunnah table did not waste and did not overindulge. It matched the food to the need and thanked Allah for both. 15. Halal spleen. Now, to a lawful exception, most Muslims have never heard explained. In Islamic law, the blood that pours from an animal is forbidden. And yet the scholars of Islam have long agreed that two of the bloods are an exception, lawful and pure to eat, the liver and the spleen. Though the spleen is of the nature of blood, the jurists across the schools count it among the permitted foods, an established exception in the law. The spleen was among the dense, strengthening foods of the household. Ibn al-Qayyim noted it among the fortifying foods to be taken in moderation. It must be halal sourced. This is a hidden sunnah of the table, a food most modern Muslims do not realize the scholars of Islam long ago named lawful when so much else of the blood is forbidden. 14. Dried cured meat, qadid, the strength food of the long journey. Qadid was sun-dried, salt-cured halal meat that the Arabs carried for months across the caravan routes, the strength of the whole animal preserved in concentrated form. It was kept in the households and carried by travelers, and it sustained the early Muslims on journeys where nothing fresh could be found. Ibn al-Qayyim discussed dried meat as heavier and slower on the body than fresh, best for the traveler and the worker who would burn it. It must be from a halal slaughtered animal. For the believing woman managing a household, qadid was the old wisdom of provision, food set aside in the season of plenty, so that no one went without in the season of need. 13. The foreleg of the sheep. Now to the cut the Prophet, peace be upon him, loved best. It is recorded in the Sahih collections that the foreleg, the dira, the shoulder cut, was among the meats most beloved to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, tender and easy to eat from the bone. Ibn al-Qayyim explained the wisdom. The foreleg is among the lightest and most easily digested of the meats, its flesh gentle on the body while still nourishing. It must be halal slaughtered. The Prophet, peace be upon him, teaches us even in his preferences that the best strength food is not the heaviest, but the one the body receives most easily. For the woman rebuilding her strength gently, the foreleg is the Sunnah's own answer, nourishing meat that does not sit heavy. 12. Camel milk, the restoring drink of the desert. Camel milk was kept in the households of the Arabs and drunk in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Among the provisions the people of the desert relied on to rebuild their strength. Ibn Sina, in his Canon of Medicine, placed camel milk among the most nourishing of all milks, uniquely suited to the depleted body, and Ibn al-Qayyim counted it among the strengthening provisions of the desert peoples. This is nourishment, not a medical protocol, but the honoring is real. Of all the milks Allah placed in the animals, He set a special richness in the milk of the camel, the beast that carries the most weight across the longest distances. For the believing woman seeking to eat as the first Muslims ate, camel milk is a Sunnah-era provision of strength. 11. Sawiq, the strength drink of travel. Now to the food the believing women carried into the hardest days. Sawiq was parched barley or wheat, ground fine and mixed with water or a little butter into a quick strengthening drink. It is recorded across the Sahih collections that sawiq was the ration of the journey and the battle. The food, the companions, and the sahabiyat who marched with them to tend the wounded and carry the water relied on when there was no time to cook. Ibn al-Qayyim described sawiq as light to carry and quick to strengthen, the field food of a people always on the move. For the believing woman, sawiq is a sunnah link to the strong women of early Islam, the ones who did not stay behind, who carried water to the wounded at Uhud and Hunayn, sustained by this simple parched grain and by their faith. 10. Meat broth, marka, the most generous strength food in the entire sunnah. Abu Dharr, may Allah be pleased with him, narrated that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, as recorded in Sahih Muslim in Hadith 2625, when you cook a broth, add extra water to it and take care of your neighbours. Marka, the meat broth, was the food that stretched to feed more than the household. Ibn al-Qayyim placed broth among the gentlest of strengthening foods, easy on the stomach and reviving for the weak and the ill. But its true honor is the teaching wrapped around it, that strength in the Sunnah is never hoarded. The believing woman who adds water to her broth so that a neighbor eats too is keeping a command of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the barakah of that food multiplies in the giving. 9. Ajwa dates of Madinah. Now to the most honored date in all the Sunnah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, as recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, in Hadith 5445, whoever eats 7 ajwa dates in the morning will not be harmed that day by poison or magic. The ajwa is the date of Madinah, dense and dark and rich. We honor it here for the strength and protection the Prophet, peace be upon him, tied to it by name. Ibn al-Qayyim placed the ajwa among the noblest of foods, strengthening to the body and blessed in itself. This is not a modern claim of cure. It is the word of the Prophet, peace be upon him, honored as he spoke it. For the believing woman beginning her morning, the 7 ajwa dates are a sunnah of both strength and barakah, taken with the name of Allah. 8. Barley, the grain of endurance. Beneath every strong household was the humblest grain. Barley was the endurance food of the Sahaba, the grain that filled the loaf and the porridge and carried a family through the lean months. We have honored barley on this channel before, and here we honor it for its strength, the slow, steady nourishment that asked little and gave much. Ibn al-Qayyim described barley as cooling, gentle, and sustaining, the grain best suited to steady endurance rather than sudden heat. And every strengthening practice of the Prophet's household, peace be upon him, how they ate, fasted, recovered, and endured, has been gathered for you in the Sunnah Home Manual. 40 daily practices, every hadith verified, every source shown. The small square code at the top of your screen will stay there for the rest of this video. Hold your phone's camera to it whenever you like, and it will carry you to sunnahgardens.com with the same link in the description below. Now, back to the foods of strength. 7. Honey, the restorer, the one food Allah, the Exalted, calls a healing. In Surah An-Nahl verse 69, Allah, glorified is He, says of the bee that from its bellies comes a drink of varying colors in which there is healing for people. We have honored honey before on this channel. Here we honor it as the restorer of the depleted, the sweetness that returns strength to the weak. Ibn al-Qayyim called honey the closest thing on earth to a complete food, quick to revive the tired body and gentle enough for anyone. A spoonful of honey stirred into warm water was, for centuries, the reviving drink of the household. This is a means of strength Allah placed in the smallest of His creatures, a food named in His book that the believing woman can reach for as the Sunnah's own gift for the tired and the recovering. 6. Olive oil, eat it and anoint with it, a food and a strength for the body inside and out. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, as recorded in Tirmidhi in Hadith 1851, eat the olive oil and anoint yourselves with it, for it comes from a blessed tree. Olive oil was the strength food that also cared for the skin and the hair, poured into the pot and rubbed into the body. Ibn al-Qayyim described olive oil as nourishing, warming, and among the most beneficial of the fats for the whole body. For the believing woman, olive oil is a sunnah that serves twice over, strength taken within and care given without. All of it from a tree Allah, the Exalted, called blessed. 5. The meat of the bone. Now to the way the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself ate meat for strength. It is recorded in the Sahih collections that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would take the meat from the bone with his teeth, and that he especially valued the meat closest to the bone. Ibn al-Qayyim noted that the flesh nearest the bone is among the sweetest and most nourishing. This is the plain, unhurried way of eating that the Sunnah honors. Meat taken directly, gratefully, nothing wasted, down to what clings to the bone. For the believing woman feeding a family, There is a Sunnah dignity in this, that the good of the food is used fully, and every part of Allah's provision is received with thanks rather than left behind. 4. Raisins. Zabib. The concentrated strength of the grape. Raisins, zabib, were kept in the households of the companions as a strengthening food and were among the provisions the Prophet, peace be upon him, kept in his home. We have honored the grape before on this channel. Here we honor it dried, its sweetness and strength concentrated for the lean seasons and the long journeys. Ibn al-Qayyim placed raisins among the strengthening foods, good for the body and for the clarity of the mind, easy to carry and slow to spoil. For the believing woman, a handful of raisins was the old Sunnah snack of strength, a small dense provision Allah made easy to store so that a taste of the vine's goodness was never far from the household, even when the harvest was long past. 3. The strength of the believing women. Before the final two, we honor the women this video is truly about. When the battle turned hard at Uhud, it is recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari that Nusayba bint Ka'b, may Allah be pleased with her, Umara, stood and shielded the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, with her own body, taking wounds meant for him. And at Hunayn, Sulaim, may Allah be pleased with her, stood ready to defend her family and faith. These were not weak women and they were not idle. They carried water, they tended the wounded, they stood their ground, sustained by the plain, strong foods of this list, and by a faith stronger than any fear. The strength of the believing woman was never only in her body, it was in her heart. And the foods of the Sunnah were the means Allah gave to carry a strong soul in a strong frame. 2. The run of Hajar. And now to the mother whose strength gave the world its most blessed spring. Hajar, the mother of Ismail, peace be upon him, was left by the command of Allah in a barren valley. No water, no people, only her infant son. When the last of her water was gone and the child cried out in thirst, she did not sit down in her despair. She climbed the hill of Safa and searched the horizon. She saw nothing. She crossed to the hill of Marwa and searched again. 7 times she ran between them in the heat, refusing to give up on the child Allah had entrusted to her. Ibn al-Qayyim and the scholars saw in her running the very image of tawakkul, trust in Allah joined to effort, not replacing it. Hajar did everything a mother could do, and then Allah did what only He could do. Her 7 runs became a rite of the Hajj itself, every pilgrim for all time retracing the strength of one desperate, faithful mother. Zamzam, the food that nourishes. And now, at number 1, the water this video began with. When Hajar had run her 7th time between the hills, Allah, glorified is He, brought forth water from the ground beside the infant Ismail, peace be upon him, the spring of Zam Zam, which has not stopped flowing from that day to this, 4,000 years later. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said of it, as recorded in Sahih Muslim, in Hadith 2473, it is blessed, it is a food that nourishes. A companion, Abu Dharr, may Allah be pleased with him, once lived for a month with nothing to eat but Zam Zam, and he grew stronger, not weaker, until the folds of his stomach showed. This is the strongest food in the entire Sunnah, and it came from the strength of a woman who would not give up. Not medicine, not a protocol, a means of nourishment Allah drew from the earth to answer the running of a faithful mother. For every woman who is tired, who is stretched thin, who feels she has run out of strength, remember Hajar, who ran until Allah answered. And remember that the same Lord who fed the world from her struggle has not forgotten yours. May Allah grant you, your mothers and your daughters, complete shifa.